Hello and welcome to episode 57, where we're going to go outside our normal remit a little bit and look at what exactly is a counterfeit. Is a counterfeit the same as a clone? And is a clone the same as a copy? It's pretty tricky, and we've all got plenty of history, and in some of the videos that we've done already, we've looked at some products that are not what they seem to be, and some of the conclusions we came to were tricky. The Shure SM7B, for example, when we looked at the counterfeit for that particular microphone, we discovered that apart from some tiny differences, it was very difficult to actually listen to them and tell which one was the clone. So I figured what we'll do today is look at some different counterfeit products. Most of the stuff we do here is to do with sound, lighting, video, but we also do communications, and we've been selling a vast range of mainly sort of mobile or walkie-talkie products on our own website and via eBay. And eBay have got some very strict rules about not selling counterfeits, and you have to watch that and don't do it. But it's getting very difficult because, like the audio products that we've been talking about, how do you determine which is which? It used to be fairly simple. If you bought something from China, it would be a copy, because things like the big name brands weren't made in China. They were made in America or Germany or places like that. Well, that's getting a bit more tricky now because so much legitimate produce is made in China that it's not really surprising if some of that makes its way onto the market. So I figured we'll go sideways a step, look at some of the communications gear that hopefully you won't be too familiar with, and see if you can make any conclusions based on what you see and some of the things that I tell you. Now, one of the first things that I've had to get my head round is the fact that OEM manufacture, original equipment manufacture, is now the way that products are made. So a factory, typically in China or Malaysia, possibly Thailand, will be set up to produce items for sale bearing another manufacturer's name. In actual fact, it's not new, because in the video line, I've had for over 20 years microphones that are attached to very specific brand cameras that are clearly all made in the same factory, and there is a Sony one and a Panasonic one and a JVC one that are all physically identical, and the only difference is the colour and the maker's name that is screen printed on the side, which makes the whole thing slightly confusing. When is a counterfeit not a counterfeit? I would like to think that in the majority of cases, counterfeits are those products that are designed to be sold to replace a genuine one. It means, in my head, if somebody wants to do some recording and doesn't have a huge amount of money and cannot afford to buy an AKG or a Neumann or any of the other expensive brands, I think it's quite hard to say those people are doing wrong if they go and buy something that says Gibson, Fender, Neumann, AKG to use themselves. I mean, it just feels nicer having a guitar that says Gibson on it, doesn't it? Rather than some Far Eastern brand. Now, I think the line that has to be crossed comes when you take that guitar that you know is not a Gibson and you sell it. There was a guy on the internet who started off being a skeptic of Chinese-made guitars that actually bore big manufacturers' names, and he started his YouTube channel by telling people how good some of these things were. And very quickly the channel turned into an anti-Chinese guitar channel. And he was telling people not to buy them. Now, I can't say whether pressure was put to play or whether perhaps he came to his senses and discovered that the Gibsons really were a lot better than the pretend Gibsons that were being sold. In this video, we're going to look at some radio equipment. And the most commonly copied radio equipment, I think, has to be ICOM. So, see what you think. First radio. I've been I've been dealing with ICOM radios for nearly 40 years. And I've had quite a few of these out on hire. It's an ICOM marine band. Little handheld unit, VHF, and they're rather nice. The thing with these particular radios is that they float, they're waterproof, they're very simple to operate, and all in all, they're a very simple radio. Nothing particularly clever about them. Belt clip, sealed unit, you undo a little screw at the bottom and a battery will pop out. I bought quite a few of those from ICOM in the UK here, quite a few years back. On the other hand, we've got this product. Now, this one is the same radio. Now, with marine band radios, there are typically 3, occasionally 4 different versions. An American version, Canadian version, an international version, and now quite commonly a UK specific version. Mainly because in the UK we do have a couple of channels that people use within England mainly, and they don't appear on a radio that has the general international channels. So one of the channels is called 37A, another one is either called P2M4, but they don't exist on a German radio. So these radios here are not counterfeit, but they are what's called a grey import. So I've got these coming from Germany. I can sell them here because the international setting is exactly the same for the German market as it is for the UK market, bar those couple of channels. And of course, because things are software programmable nowadays, I can plug this into a computer and I can actually add back in the couple of channels that we need for England. So these are not sold as through the English dealer chain at all. They're actually from the German chain, and I've sort of brought them in sideways into the country. So this one is not a counterfeit, but it is a grey import. What it really means is, if I sell it here in the UK, the onus will be totally on me to support it. So if it goes wrong, the warranty is my problem. I've got no redress. I can't go back to ICOM UK in this country and say, this radio's brand new, but it's gone wrong and it's only 2 weeks old, 2 months old. They're not going to supply me with any parts. And I don't blame them. I didn't buy it from them, so, you know, that we're cut out of the system. But I can live with that business-wise. It works quite nicely. If I pull this radio out of the box, it's clearly the same, except for this one's brand spanking new and nice and shiny, with no scratches on it. But it is the same radio. And as you can see from the display there, channel 37. Well, 37A is one of these English channels that is not in an international spec radio. And clearly now, with the programming that I've done, this radio is now UK spec. Fine. Now I think we'll move on to something that is absolutely, definitely, 100% a problem. This cardboard box here contains what is supposed to be a Motorola, an MT777. The bizarre thing is I can find no trace whatsoever of Motorola ever making a radio called an MT77. So if I open the box up, quite clearly we have a nice box, we have a nice instruction book, FM transceiver, MT777, but the radio looks a bit like a Motorola. But the weird thing is, it doesn't have a badge. There should be a little thing in that window there saying Motorola. So
power, low voltage.
Power, low voltage. Now, that little message was also in English, Wasn't in Chinese.
Low voltage.
Yeah, it's definitely low voltage. But that particular radio, I don't believe is a genuine Motorola. One, because I don't think they ever made something called a 777. And two, the battery pack inside, there would normally be a sticker on there. That little space there would normally say Motorola. They normally say Motorola made in Malaysia or something like that. And this one says nothing. Same thing with the inside of the radio. There should be stickers in all these little recesses. And there's not. It says 136 to 174, which relates to the fact that it's a VHF radio. But I don't think this is genuine. So, I mean, there's no way in a million years you could sell this and say it's a Motorola. For two reasons. I mean, one, I don't think Motorola made them. And two, it clearly isn't one. The battery charger, the little drop-in charger. Again, little empty spaces where there should be a brand name. Now, I don't know if that really should say Motorola or some other brand. It's just, I don't know. So, I can't really sell this as a Motorola, which means I can't sell it on eBay, can I? Because the box says Motorola, the instructions say Motorola. I guess I could probably sell just the radio and the charger, the aerial. But I'd have to take it out of the box. I couldn't sell it like this. That's not legit, because this is pretending to be a Motorola. As the radio goes, it's actually okay. It's cheap. It does the job. And here, this would be perfectly legal for someone to use. Licenses are available here that would be perfectly okay with this radio, but not with Motorola on the box. So let's have a look at something else. Now, one of the other things that happens with radios, and particularly I've noticed with ICOM, is that my belief and the info I'm getting from a couple of the factories, different factories, and so it sort of corroborates with each other, is that a lot of products are actually made in China for ICOM. And the rights and the wrongs of that are nothing to do with me at the moment, but essentially the radios are made in China. Now, when that radio comes to the end of its life, what happens? ICOM move on to a new model. But there's probably stacks of components that have still been made. So what we're looking at is probably a factory that's made the plastic boxes. Another factory has actually made the little radio PCBs and the actual component part of it. Another factory has probably made the batteries. They all come together and it turns into an ICOM radio. So I got some of these. ICOM ICV8. Now this is a very old design. Typically when I bought these the last time, we were looking at moving into the year 2000. It's a long time ago. They were nice radios, and so when I got offered a couple of these, I thought I'll have a look and see. Now the first thing is the radio itself looks quite nice. It's a bit of an old-fashioned style of radio. It's certainly a bit bigger and chunkier, but the plastic has got a slightly green tinge to it. I don't know if you can pick it up on there, but if you look at the side of the radio, this side has got the slightly green tinge. The battery at the back is black. So that's the normal colour that you'd expect to see on the radio. So my guess is a firm in China made loads of these battery packs and they had loads left over. I'm also assuming that the other firm that made all the internal components probably had a lot left over, but maybe they ran out of cases, but they had the moulding machines. And so what's happened, sort of 15, 20 years after a product was popular, there's enough bits to make more. I don't know if that makes this an ICOM or not. It's certainly, ICOM themselves have got it on their website and it's shown as a discontinued model, and if you poke about you'll find that discontinuation is ancient, but it does appear to have all the things that I remember in my head when we had this model as a genuine radio back in the day. If I can get it open and apart. The battery pack has the typical thing. Now, we've been on lithium ion cells for quite a while now, haven't we? Well, this is an MIMH. So it's an older style of battery pack. But there again, it's an older style of radio. So it does appear to be legit. It does say ICOM Inc. made in Japan. Now, I don't believe that, but I'm not going to criticise it because so many ICOM radios do actually say on them made in Japan when the actual parts came from China. And there's one of those little sort of slight snagettes, isn't there? When is a product made? Is it when someone makes the bits, or is it when it was put together into a fully functioning working product? I genuinely don't know. Don't have an opinion. But I suspect Fender and Gibson and people like that do exactly the same thing with their guitars. We don't know where all the components and parts come from, but they come out of a factory, and the Fender will either put made in America or put made in Mexico, and they also do some that were made further east. But this particular radio is quite pleasant. It seems to do the job. It's typical old school though, because it's got a really, really small display. I'm not sure. It's really tiny numbers. But memory says that's what the old one had. But it's such a long time ago that I really don't know. But it's a VHF radio. It's small-ish. It's chunky. And I'd like to think that radio is sufficiently ICOM to be called ICOM. If it was made for them and they didn't use them, I don't know. I just have my doubts about the case because it's definitely got a greeny tinge. It also says in the instruction book that it's got a voice scrambler. Well, I can't make that work, so I'm assuming the voice scrambling board that used to go inside is missing. So maybe they didn't have any of those left. But again, a perfectly functional and licensable radio here in the UK. And quite a nice looking thing, I think. And then I come to this last radio. This is an ICOM. It's an IC V85. Now, they made two versions of these originally. They made a UHF one and a VHF one. And I had a UHF one years ago. Not that long, really. So I thought that the VHF one would be worth having a look at. So I got my hands on an ICOM IC V85. Now, the minute I opened the box, this is where the warning bells on this one. Instead of a nice manual, I've got a double-sided sheet. So that didn't look like I remember, but the ICOMs normally have a nice book. So I googled for the instruction manual, and that is not it. In actual fact, the contents of this instruction sheet are totally different from the ICV85 that ICOM have on their website. There's also a few typos on here. So I'm thinking, I don't think this is a V85. So I had a look at the radio. Well, it's a nice little dinky radio. But a bit of Googling again brought up something different. The ICV85 have that writing across the bottom here. That's a small point. This one says ICV85 there, and it's got an ICOM badge there. The pictures on the internet don't look like that. But there's something even stranger about this radio. Has an antenna, okay, screw it on. And that's when things jog my memory a little bit as to something's wrong here. And on the ICOM official ICV85 that's been discontinued for quite a few years, the antenna is on that side and the volume knob is on that side, and there isn't a little red panic button on the top. Now this front part of the moulding looks as close as I can see from photographs that are on the net to be the same as the original. So the function button, the up and down buttons there, and the little keypad, they look normal. So I'm left wondering if this is nothing but the plastic moulding that really was an ICOM with a totally new radio inside. I just don't see any way it could be different. The menu system is totally different as well. It's even stranger. So the radio does say ICOM, ICV85 inside. It says it's 7 watt. I don't believe that. It also says it was made in Japan, and I definitely don't believe that. Couple of reasons really. The instruction book very clearly offers some programming tips, and the original ICOM was either a VHF version, the V85, or a UHF version, the U85. And ICOM had most of their products in the two different bands, all the way through from the late 80s onwards. And this radio seems to have an operating system that allows for both. So what I did, using the secret code that's in this book, I reprogrammed this VHF radio to be a UHF radio, and it accepted all the frequencies. It let me program it. The power output is tiny and totally insufficient, so it does radiate something on UHF, but it's microwatts. It didn't even tickle the meter, and the receive capability is also incredibly deaf. So it has the programming side of the UHF one, but of course all of the RF stages, the tune circuits, are optimized for VHF, and so as a UHF radio it's impossible. And oddly, I discovered that you can program this electronics wise anywhere from 50 megahertz to 500 megahertz, so you can enter channels anywhere you like within that range. But until it gets to VHF, and in this particular radio, until it gets about 136 through to about 174 or so, the receive is deaf and the transmit is tiny. But I don't think ICOM designed their ICV85 to be able to do that. I don't have a genuine one to try, but this I am 100% happy to call a counterfeit, because if it does have anything that was originally belonging to the ICOM, it's the case. You know, if you were going to put completely new innards in it, and you're going to put a different RF stage in it, and you're going to put radios that got buttons and completely different menu systems, well, it seems a bit silly to put it in an old ICOM case. I really don't know. But my take on all this stuff is that if you buy a product, you pretend it's something else and you try and sell it knowing that it's a counterfeit, that's bad. So what do we have? In things audio, in things lighting, in things video, in things radio, we actually have products being made in one factory given the brand name of somebody else. And at some point it either is legitimate or it's not. ICOM, for example, have some of their radios made in China, but from what I can discover, they then get taken to Japan and programmed, and then all the radios say on them, made in Japan. Now, clearly they can't be made in Japan and made in China, but I guess that's just the world we live in now. We buy things, we sell things, and I think as long as we're not ripping people off, there's nothing wrong with people getting a bit of a bargain. So this episode turned into a tale of morals, really, didn't it? Morals and ethics. When is a product genuine and when is a product not genuine? It's even worse with radios because quite often there'll be 3 radios from different manufacturers that are exactly the same product. A good example is Kydera, Radioddity, and then sometimes it even is sold with a brand like Retivis on it. So Retivis, Radioddity and Kydera, all exactly the same product. There can only be one factory who are producing them, and whose is it? Which one of those 3 brands? Are the others counterfeits? Or are they clones? Are they copies? Or is it just what really happens when people make products and then pick brand names to put on them? If the manufacturers support it, is that a problem? I genuinely don't know. I do know that I've got a Motorola MT777 radio that I really can't sell as a Motorola because I'm absolutely positive it's not, and it's pretending to be one. That's out. And the other thing is I've got an icon that is clearly not genuine. The ICV85 just isn't one. It works differently, it does different things, and the menu system to program it is completely different. But it looks like one, and that's what the label says. So I think that one's out too. The ICOM ICV8. I think it's genuine, and I think the only thing about it that's probably not genuine is that the bodies, so the plastic housings that have been made for it, have been made probably 20 years later. No doubt the machine that made the original plastic housings was still about. Someone's fixed it up, got it working. They've got all the innards, they've put them together in a box, and they have some brand new ICOM radios. I think that's probably the best description of that one. Anyway, that's episode 57. My take on counterfeits. See you on the next one. Look after yourselves and take care.